Ladies and gentlemen, let's get serious. All right, enough of this. Nope, not again. Happy Easter, everyone. Praise be. Christ is risen. Christ, the King, is risen. And it is good to imitate Jesus. Be like Jesus, everyone, as best as you can. Oh, but Paul, I'm not certain that Jesus rose from the dead. I don't have any empirical evidence that Jesus rose from the dead. Interesting. I don't have any empirical evidence that you're conscious. You don't have any empirical evidence that I'm conscious, and yet you believe it just the same. Think about that for a while. How certain are you that I'm conscious? How certain are you that your mother is conscious? Oh, well, I'm certain. Oh, but you can't be. It's technically impossible to be certain about because you have no evidence. You have faith. And ladies and gentlemen, faith is a very interesting phenomenon. Hope everyone went to church today. Unless, of course, you are not a Christian, in which case may God bless you. Just the same. All right, everyone, we have quite a stream today. It's 2 p.m. We got to wrap this up in within 2 hours, okay? We got to keep 2 hours is a long time to stream. I have two primary segments here, okay? Normally I try to do 3. Today we're doing 2, which means I have a little bit more room to freestyle, okay? So for those of you who, want to pose some interesting questions, pose some interesting perspectives, happy to do so. By the way, shout out to Michael of Uncle Diogenes for the great meme smithing. Okay, these memes are available, of course, in the meme smithing channel of the Discord. A second disciple has reached the empty tomb, sir. I don't know this reference, but I'm sure it's funny. This is a good one. I could have just as well used this one. It's excellent, everyone. More Christian memes, please. Anyway. Gaming stream when? Listen. It sounds like Age of Empires because it is. Gaming stream, here's the problem with gaming streams, ladies and gentlemen. I only have so much dopamine in my brain. And when you try to game and stream, it's so stressful because half my brain's like, is the stream even working? And I'm just so, the pressure's on, so I don't look like I'm terrible at the game. Although I've gotten better. And I'm technically in the top 80 percentile of AoE 2, 1v1, so. Maybe I create a second channel for gaming and just complete nonsense. Happy Easter. What are my thoughts about Christian nationalism in the U.S.? This is not a topic I ever talk about, so I can't address it here. Paul, am I actually religious? Christian. The irony of a man with your name asking me that. You know how much Jordan Peterson I've watched? Am I religious? I act religious. I act as though Jesus rose from the dead. Went to church at 8:15 this morning. Oh. Real ones do remember. I was thinking about that the other day. Sounds like DJT. All right, well, we're just waiting. We're just waiting until a little, give some people some time to see that the stream is on so we can engage in our propaganda, our dark centrist propaganda. Listen, April's going to be a good month, everyone. April's going to be a great month, okay? There's no reason that I cannot put in the effort to produce at least one relevant, productive video a day. I'm not here to slop post, okay? There are certain videos I don't do because I just don't feel they're that productive. And I don't want to attach my brand to that, okay? For example, I shouldn't even say this. I'm not going to say it. But there's important things going on. And it's important to communicate and ensure that people are listening to good commentators like me instead of bad ones like other people. So anyway, let's get these segments up and ready here, and we'll start momentarily. Let's get these tabs up. Why not? Why not? All right. Ooh, that's a good one. That's a bingo. Ladies and gentlemen, what else? What else should be discussed prior to the beginning of our actual content here? Do you think Tucker Carlson would be a good president? Great, even. Great, even. Honestly, Trump's post this morning praising Allah. This isn't real. Hold on, I gotta check. Is it real? Praise Allah. Holy shit. 7 hours ago. Open the fucking strait or face bombing Tuesday. President Trump threatens to bomb Iran's power plants and bridges if it doesn't open the Strait of Hormuz. Planning to commit war crimes, Tehran has accused Trump of. Held indirect negotiations. Last I checked, the negotiating leader was killed, or the person, the Iranian who was leading negotiations, was killed. I wonder by whom? By whom? Living hell for every single family. Respecting the rights of the Iranian people. Interesting. Well, that's not great. Paul, I really enjoyed your interview with Tony from One Dime. Will you do any podcast stuff with him? I probably will. I like One Dime. I like Tony. He's a good leftist. Good leftist, one of the few. Not one of the few. There's a lot of good leftists. There really are. But people, when I say, screw these leftists, people know what I'm talking about. People know what I'm talking about. The blue-haired people, who say that the nation state should be dissolved and that whites are problematic. All right, anyway. Let's talk about white identity politics, ladies and gentlemen. Let's talk about the whites. Should we start with this? Yeah, I don't see why we can't. I don't see why we can't start with that. No. Oops. Okay, maybe I preface it. Remember, I cut these in for the video. So I got to pretend that this is a very smooth, natural transition. Anyway, everyone, let's talk about the white. White racial identity politics, actually, though. Here's something interesting. Breaking: mural for Irina Zarutska will be removed after Providence Mayor Smiley condemned it.
Well, Emily Jean, it's still here, but not for long. Artist Ian Gaudreau tells me he's sad it's come to this point, but after calls from Mayor Smiley and other local leaders to remove the mural, it felt like only a matter of time before this happened.
The artwork is going to be removed.
Artist Ian Gaudreau breaking the news to NBC 10 Monday afternoon. The Irina Zarutska mural is coming down.
A lot of people voiced their frustrations, and voices were heard, and the work is coming down as a reaction to that.
We want to make sure, ultimately, we want to make sure that every community member that calls Providence home feels safe. And we can both agree that this mural behind us does not reflect Providence's values, nor does it reflect the creativity that we want to see in our city. Ultimately,
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem with the whites, okay? And it's manifesting in white racial identity politics. So let me say a few things. The problem with us American whites is deracination, okay? Rootlessness. Deracination. I, as an American white, am not a European white. I'm not English. I'm not Polish. I am an American white. And we have a problem. One of those problems is just genuine anti-white racism, like that Irina Zarutska mural. It's beyond absurd that there are George Floyd murals up the wazoo. But because it's a white woman that got stabbed by a black person, therefore it can't be shown. It doesn't reflect the values. So there's a deeper problem, though. There's a deeper problem. It has to do with what is an American, what is a white American. Now, one moment, I have to get a prop. It's a very important prop to illustrate this point. Just come back with a swastika armband. No, that's a joke. Ladies and gentlemen, behold what it means to be an American. What it means to be an American, in the standard sense, is this cup. This cup represents abiding by America's laws, right? Having citizenship, agreeing to a set of common laws and things that you can't do, restricting free speech and all that. That's what the common notion of what an American is. Okay, but the thing is this just tells you what you can't do. There's a substance that you can pour into the cup. So, for example, if you're Indian American, you can pour Indianness into the cup, right? And then you're an American citizen, but you have substantive Indian culture. Maybe you're Hindi, you have particular foods, you have particular cuisines, traditions, norms, stuff like that. If you're Irish, you can pour Irishness into the cup, which is mostly just whiskey. But you have an affirmative tradition, an affirmative set of values and norms and substance, in cultural substance, right? And you can do that with anything. Indian American, Indonesian American, Chinese American, whatever. But here I am, a white American mutt who has no allegiance to Europe. What do I pour into this cup? What is the positive substance of white Americanism? Well, you can't even ask that question because people will say you're racist. Oh, white identity politics, that's disgusting. It's disgusting. This is why we need to take down the mural of Irina Zarutska, because it's bad. Let me just give a funny example. White affinity groups. We talk about, this is by the Institute for Social Change. This is like a DEI type aid. Racial affinity groups. BIPOC participants are affirmed in their racial affinity group. And then white affinity group space is important because it creates the conditions for white people to recognize the profound impact of racism on their lives, on the lives of black, indigenous, and people of color. White people teach one another about racism and privilege that accrues. There's no positive aspect to being white. And this is the problem. This is the problem. We need something positive and affirmative as white Americans to pour into this cup and have as our thing. Now, it's a very difficult question to answer what that is. I have a couple hypotheses. One is the quintessential aspect of being a white American is the sacrifice of your ancestors, and a particular sacrifice, the sacrifice of their previous identity. Right? My grandparents came here as immigrants, at least on my dad's side, Polish immigrants. They did not teach my dad any Polish. Why? Because they wanted him to assimilate. They said, listen, we're going to leave behind the old world. We're going to leave behind this identity and assimilate to this new American identity. So part of the quintessential white American identity is the sacrifice of a previous identity. Now, that's also true with other identities. I mentored a kid, a student in Dallas at this high school who was Hispanic. He didn't speak Spanish. It was crazy to me. Like, damn, that's also a sacrifice. That is a quintessential American thing to do. The kind of not like rejection because it's bad, but the sacrifice of a previous central part of an identity to assimilate to a new one. I think that's positive. I think that can be affirmed. I think that's interesting. Then also you have the shared experience of being a common people that goes to a common set of experiences, things of that nature. Anyway, I don't have the answer, but my point is we must pour something into this cup. It must be pro-white. It must be good. And we need to stop the anti-white racism that comes with people who want to pour something into this cup. Now, the problem is very intelligent people might not have, what would you say? Dispute the necessity of this. So let me just give you an example. Where is it here? 5842. Brother. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, I had a conversation with a professor of African American Studies, and it's on my Patreon. You can join the Patreon for $3 a month for exclusive videos. I put this one up behind a paywall for a variety of reasons, but let me just pull up this segment, okay? Michael Sawyer is a professor of African American Studies. I don't know exactly where, but let's just listen to this. I don't think that, in my opinion, the approach is not, you shouldn't feel these things because you got to understand the history. It's... Oh, wait, hold on. What am I at? 59.43? No, 58.43. Here we go. All of the metrics that we use to say certain minorities are behind white people, if you apply it, a lot of it to like young white men, for example, in terms of just like life expectancy, suicide rate, drug abuse, loneliness, inability to get a job, buy a house, all this stuff, they are, and I do think it's a generational thing, probably first and foremost. It's like the young white men who are attracted to Nick Fuentes or are vulnerable to the people like Nick Fuentes are, in my opinion, in such a categorically different category than like the white boomers who actually do occupy positions of power and who much of the, like the historical reality of like white kind of what you want to call white supremacy and the reality of that is like the white boomers are kind of the inheritors of that. And the young, and I hear it from them. It's like the young white men are like, that's not me. I have just as much trouble living, buying a house or getting a job and all that stuff. And it's like, I don't think that, in my opinion, the approach is not, you shouldn't feel these things because you got to understand the history. You need to understand the history, but like, there's an element of like, yeah, like I can put myself in their shoes and understand the grievances that they
claim to feel. And
I don't have that kind of sympathy for him. I mean, yeah, I just can't get there. I mean, it's like that whole like Nick Fuentes, or who's the Canadian sociologist with the I'm talking about the guy who's in the man's males are under attack.
Jordan Peterson.
I just can't with these people, man. It's like, it's so depraved. It's so like fragile, right? It's so like that's what's so internally incoherent about it, right? It's like this whole like masculine thing is based upon like profound fragility, where women, I can't be around women because they're scary and don't like me. I'm worried about, immigrants. I'm worried about Black people. I'm worried about gay people. I'm worried about trans people. I'm worried about, I can't have the car I want. I can't live in the place I want to live. I can't get the job I want because, some Black person got it because they didn't deserve it. Just like, what are you talking about, man? Right? It's like, come on, right? None of that is true, right? And so then it becomes a political ideology and excuses that somebody tells you to stop whining so much about it, and now you get to lash out, and then the next reaction is, well, I become Nick Fuentes and the Quakers, and we're going to sit around and like figure out that women shouldn't be allowed to vote, and Jordan Peterson is the guy where every man should be allocated a wife bullshit, right? It's like, where are you coming up with this, man? Because what they call them, the Kens and the Kwames or whatever, who get all the women and they hate them too. Like, what?
Yeah, so part of the reason I didn't post that was because he didn't know, really much about me, and I felt it was not fair to him for him to not know that Jordan Peterson, is a big influence on me and all that. And so anyway, my point is, there is a real intellectual strain that regards like just having sympathy for like white grievance or whatever as just problematic to begin with. I would say that's problematic. And another thing that is genuinely, I would say, anti-white is the hypocrisy of it. Hold on real quick. Only because it's relevant. Normally I wait till the end of the segment for super chats. Race isn't everything, but it isn't nothing. Well said, Justin. Dark centrism, baby. It's not everything, but it's not nothing. Look at that. It's almost like the dark center is truly where light is born. Anyway. Not to make a race thing by calling it the dark center. But there's real hypocrisy when it comes to, like, perspectives on whiteness and white identity politics. So, for example, a very common thing that I encounter are white people saying, hold on, I should rephrase this. One thing that some white people will say is, I want to marry a white person in order to have white kids that look like me. And in my opinion, that's a perfectly valid moral intuition. That's like a black person saying, I want to marry a black person to have black kids that look like me. However, when the white people do it, it's considered hate speech, no race mixing. White supremacists fear and hate the concept of multiracial couples, believing that such relationships pollute the pure white race. As a result, a fairly common white supremacist symbol depicts a multiracial couple or family with the red cancel bar over it. So the ADL says people who say they don't like race mixing is a hate symbol. Now, to be clear, I think it is a litmus test of whether you're pro-social or antisocial. If you believe that it's wrong for other people to marry outside of their race, you're a degenerate. It's fine to have that intuition for yourself. It's fine to want to have children that look like you. That's perfectly fine. But if you get upset with white people for marrying black people, or if you're black and you get upset at black people for marrying white people, degenerate. Of course, here's the interesting part. The ADL. Who's the head of the ADL? Well, that's right, Jonathan Greenblatt. What did he say not too long ago?
Concern over intermarriage. Let's take a listen to that. But like, this is why we need a revolution in our community on so many levels. So look, the reality is that intermarriage rates continue to go up. Assimilation continues apace. And look, I fight anti-Semitism. That is my job. But I worry a great deal about broader questions of Jewish identity, as I think we talked about over lunch.
So concerned about intermarriage, which is interesting because
Interesting. So in order to preserve a particular racial identity, interracial marriage rates going up are bad. But for example, if white people, white Americans want to preserve sort of a white American kind of identity or subculture, that's problematic. Interesting. Well, surely the head of the ADL is just an isolated incident, right? No, like, mainstream journalist would talk about this. Oh, wait. Brett Stevens, who's probably the most mainstream journalist you can imagine, at the State of World Jewry address, which I thought the only people that say World Jewry are anti-Semites, but apparently the World Zionist Congress has a yearly keynote. Anyway, here's what he says.
What Franklin Foer called the golden age of American Jews, which he said in an Atlantic article was ending, was actually fading long before October 7th. It has been fading for decades, starting when American Jews began to treat their Jewishness as the most disposable part of their identity. It was fading when bar and bat mitzvahs became the last Jewish ritual many American Jews observed in their lives. It was fading when intermarriage rates crept above 50%. It was fading as a growing percentage of American Jews started to feel more embarrassment than pride in Israel.
So it is the hypocrisy. You know, why is all there this anti-Semitism? Why is there this rise of white identity politics? It's like, look, again, as Justin so eloquently pointed out, race isn't everything, but it isn't nothing. It's perfectly fine for people of a particular identity group to want to have a cohesive identity. That's fine. When you start to view people of your own race as traitors when they marry outside of that group, or you view that as problematic, that's when you become an antisocial degenerate. Whether you're a white person telling other white people that they're having mixed race kids and you call those kids racial slurs, that's antisocial and degenerate beyond all belief. And if you're Jewish and you say, well, Jews who marry outside their race, you know, they're not helping the state of Israel. They're threatening the Jewish. It's like, okay, this is backwards. Truly. Now, in response to the white pagans, oops, this is a pretty succinct summary of my view on kind of white identity politics as it manifests. For hate speech. But what I will say is that I find it hilarious that a bunch of white pagans are telling me that it would be immoral for me to marry and have children with someone who isn't white. On what basis are you making that moral claim? The white racialists say it's natural to feel a greater affinity to your own kin, which is true. That's why it's perfectly reasonable to love your own family and children more so than the strangers in the town over. But who are you to tell me where I draw the boundaries of who I consider my kin or my in-group? I believe in evolution, which means that all human beings come from the same genetic lineage. And if you want to arbitrarily draw your in-group, out-group boundaries between white Europeans and everyone else, you're free to do that. But don't pretend that makes you morally superior to me when I draw my in-group, out-group boundaries between my fellow God-fearing American citizens and degenerate pagans like yourself. I do not feel a greater sense of kinship with someone in a European country that I've never been to than I do with my Asian or Hispanic friend who I grew up with and have a shared history in this country with. If you think white people's problems would be solved by focusing more on race, I encourage you to get back to your medieval map-based strategy games and learn more about the interethnic horror that occurred between the English, Scottish, and Irish, for example. Cannot be beat. How does he do it? How does he work in a Medieval 2 Total War clip in the middle of his ramblings on white racial politics? It's just too good. But look, the point is, you can recognize there's a double standard. You can recognize there's real anti-white racism. And you can recognize that you are entitled to have the impulse that you can marry whoever you want for whatever reason you want. And if one of those reasons is I want to have kids that look like me, that's perfectly valid and should be defended. And any liberal, any leftist who says it's actually wrong if white people want to marry other white people and have white babies, such degenerate nonsense. But again, this idea of like, well, white people intermarrying and having mixed race kids it's a form of slow white genocide. It's like, look, there is a big difference between white people not having kids because, just family formation is being reduced due to economic factors. People are degenerate. OnlyFans is being promoted. Casual sex, promiscuity, all this stuff, all the things that deteriorate the social structure in which long-term monogamous relationships kind of require. If white people are not having kids because of that, that's bad. And you can call it white erasure and white genocide. I don't really, whatever term you want to use. White genocide is a little provocative, but whatever. However, there's a big difference between white people not having kids at all and then white people marrying outside of the race and having mixed race kids, because they're still spreading white genes. And it's so funny because it's like, well, it's white genocide. It's like, okay, well, if that's white genocide, it's also the genocide of the race that white person is marrying. So it's white genocide and black genocide or Hispanic, whatever. And there's a massive difference between that. And I think it's perfectly, what I want my kids to have are my genes that contain my schizophrenic identity. Whether or not they look like me 100 or 200 years from now is really not that relevant for me. But if you don't have that intuition, that's fine. And I think you're entitled to that. And I think you're entitled to say, Paul, I don't understand you. But if you think I'm wrong, Fred, if you accuse me of participating in white genocide, because I'd be willing to have been in an interracial marriage with some absolutely thick, absolutely wonderful, beautiful Asian, black, Hispanic woman, whatever it is, then you are an antisocial degenerate, and the darkness has no place for you. Right? It's also perfectly valid to say, I want to live in a world where there are white people around. Like, it would be worse off if there were no white people around. And that's a valid moral intuition that you actually don't have to justify or defend. It's actually perfectly valid to want to be around people that look like you. That's fine. So, tough shit for the leftists. Sorry. It's not just the leftists, okay? I feel like also, I say leftist too often. I should start saying libtard. To draw a clear distinction. Oh, also, last clip. This is just funny. On the topic of white race politics, wouldn't be a complete segment without showing Richard Spencer and Nick Fuentes. By the way, Richard Spencer follows me on Twitter, so I have credentials within the white race community, okay? I just thought this was an interesting clip.
Stuff. And you say, if that's going to be the path of the most resistance, are we just fighting gravity? Like, are we fighting a completely lose battle? Because I think about even my life, and I think I live in a diverse city, and I prefer it. I'd rather live in a diverse city than live in like the trad Catholic commune in Coeur d'Alene, or the trad Catholic city in Kansas, or the whites only town where I
think you would be a little bored at Back to the Land. Like, the third time there was bagpipe music and on Friday night, and I think you might be running away back to Park Slope, Brooklyn, or something. Yeah.
Well, and there's
I get it.
There's like a boredom, because I know there were some people from DC after Trump lost in 2020. They all fucked off to like Wyoming, and they did the whole LARP off the grid, and they all wanted to kill themselves. They were all calling their friends in DC, hey, how's it going? What's going on? What's new? Because they were bored. And it's like, at the end of the day, we have to grapple with the fact people like the way things are. People are going to complain and bitch, and they'll talk about, I want to be a part of something bigger. People kind of actually like the way things are a lot, and you could see it in their behavior. And I would say...
Interesting. Two things on that. First off, this is from the original Rumble stream. comments are kind of interesting. Listening to how these guys praise today's society is special. How could we ever live without phones? Nick would rather live in a diverse city than among whites? What are we even doing? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, the white racialists are getting upset with Nick Fuentes. The cities are fucking dog shit. Don't see white people. Hassled by the street. I'll take Wyoming nature. City cucks are lost. Interesting. Which, you know, again, it gets into an interesting point about, well, how would I describe this? Yeah, this whole issue is fraught because Nick Fuentes is saying he likes diversity and all that, and it's pissing off his own viewers. It's interesting. You know, Coleman Hughes, supposedly this highly enlightened, you know, on the cutting edge of memetics. He would never say that, but that's what people who have my framework would attempt to describe it as. Coleman Hughes says there's podcast Nick, and then there's real Nick. And podcast Nick is what he is like, you know, trying to clean up his image, and then real Nick is the one on Rumble that says what he really believes. Do you think he's lying in this clip? Do you think he's lying to Richard Spencer? Or do you think Nick Fuentes actually would prefer living in a diverse city than on some trad white commune? I tend to think it's the latter. Right? Now, what that means is up for debate, but my point is, white racial identity politics has nuance and complexity. It must be discussed. And I really do think the cup metaphor is very useful. What is an American is the cup. The laws, the assimilation to legal codes, the substance we pour in it. That's what must be discussed. Nobody loves the whites more than me. And if I was truly performative, I would pour some milk in here and chug it on stream. But instead, I'll just end by saying, nobody loves the whites more than I do. That's my opinion, ladies and gentlemen. That's my opinion. Now, are there any morons in chat who disagree with me? I don't like to poison the well up front, but are there any fucking idiots who disagree with me? Coleman Hughes loves Israel. Number one biggest Israel fan. Let's not be racist and anti-Semitic here. It's not degenerate, it's natural, accept it. So what's so interesting is people say like it's inherent, it's a natural impulse to want to be with someone of your own race. And I would go, actually, it's a natural impulse to want to be with someone, it's more of a primal impulse to want to be in a romantic relationship with someone who shares your values and someone you get along with from a personality perspective and someone you find attractive, more so than it is to be with someone of your own race particularly. If the choice is between a beautiful woman of a different race who shares your values or someone of the same race who is much different, it's just laughably, I don't know. It's a laughable denial of reality to pretend that it's more natural to be with your own race, and it's all conditioning. Yes, it's definitely social conditioning that makes white men attracted to beautiful Hispanic women. Oh, this is totally a product of social engineering, you know. Please and thank you. Now, here are the questions that need to be asked. No, listen. I have a plan, all right? My plan is to go on YouTube, talk about transgender children, the Holocaust, and white identity politics. And if I do that enough, I'll probably get a girlfriend, right? That seems to be quite logical. Shout out my brother from another mother. FD signifier. Did I miss anything there? I don't think so. We'll cover Destiny here momentarily. All right, now that we've completed the white politics segment. Excuse me. Let me just get my affairs in order here. Anyway. Thoughts on the clean break memo. You know, I read it because Dave Smith would always say you got to read the clean break memo. And I was like, all right, I'll look into it. It's not, see, let me give some rhetorical advice for all you aspiring politicians, influencers, so on and so forth. Here's some good advice. If you want to convey a point of view, a good strategy is to anchor on a single fact. Pick one fact that is most indicative, most true with regard to transmitting your worldview. So like for me, I think if I want to convey to people why I believe what I believe about Israel, I simply point out the existence of Ben-Gvir, because it is the single most indisputable example of all of the horrible shit that Israel does, that Jewish supremacy involves, that makes normal people want to hate Israel. And I'm so correct about that, it's laughable. And you just need to anchor on one solid fact. So this was my point with all the leftists who were doing, Free Palestine. There was so much, let's spray paint Free Palestine everywhere. It's like, you dumb motherfuckers. You should have spray painted Google Ben-Gvir. Imagine if every sidewalk in the street had Google Ben-Gvir instead of Free Palestine. You could have actually changed people's minds. But of course, the dumbass leftist mentality is, well, Americans are actually subtler colonialists just like Israel. And so there's no way to change their mind. White Americans like, the Jewish supremacists, Israeli settlers, because it reminds them of themselves, It's like, it's this insane, fucked up worldview. So it precludes the ability of hey, we could actually communicate something basic that would turn the average American against Israel if they just knew the most basic facts. Again, some things seem so obvious. It never occurred to these leftists to do this. Why? Incompetence. Anyway, this is a good segue into our next segment having to do with Destiny. So, all right, ignore the title here.
But I think you make a really good point.
Title is weighing in a looks magazine, but they discuss Destiny's support for Israel. And here's what I'll say. Why is it important to pay attention to someone like Destiny? Why is it important to keep tabs on where his head is at, where his audience's head is at? And it's basic meme adoption curve 101, ladies and gentlemen. Basic meme adoption curve 101. Okay, reminder. The meme adoption curve. So it's like the technology adoption curve, right? The cell phone started out as a giant brick that nobody had. And then, a few, all the nerds were doing it. Were using cell phones. And then a few people were like, this is actually a good idea. And then the normies started catching on. And then eventually, the boomers and the Amish catch on. By that point, we have a new type of cell phone. We have a smartphone. And then the process continues. So ideas function the same way. They start out up here, and they spread throughout a population. They start here in the niche, terminally online influencer space. They spread to people who pay attention to these online influencers, and it spreads to everyone else. So Destiny is here. Nick Fuentes is here. Right? Political consultants are here. Because political consultants will watch Destiny, see what the good ideas are, and then, bring them up to their campaign that they're running. And then all the people who the campaign messaging targets hear these ideas. Basic meme adoption curve, okay? And Destiny absolutely has influence in terms of people who are very politically engaged and work in politics will listen to someone like Destiny. So, whoops. Let's listen to what Destiny has to say about Israel and the latest nonsense coming out of there, which, just to preface, again, let's take 1 minute to understand what's going on in the bastion of Western civilization. This is Ben Gvir, everyone. Like I was saying, anchor on to one fact. Just follow what he does, and you'll get a good idea of what's going on in Israel.
The man popping champagne is Israel's far-right national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir. And what he's celebrating is the death penalty, specifically a new law that just passed Israel's parliament approving the death penalty for Palestinians convicted of killing Israelis. It makes hanging the default punishment for Palestinians convicted of nationalistic killings.
You can even see these noose-shaped pins on the lapels of lawmakers who supported this legislation.
Those convicted have to be hanged within 90 days without the possibility of an appeal. And the law doesn't explicitly say that it's about Palestinians, but if you look at the wording of the text, it talks about those convicted of killing Israelis with the, quote, intent to negate the existence of the state of Israel, meaning it won't apply to extremist Israelis who kill Palestinians like we've been seeing recently in the West Bank, for example. Now, beyond the discriminatory nature of this law, human rights organizations and international leaders, particularly in Europe, are expressing concerns about this law because of the impact it will have on Palestinians living in the West Bank, because those Palestinians are under military law. And under military courts in Israel, what we've seen is a 96% conviction rate, according to B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights organization. And oftentimes those convictions are obtained following harsh interrogation and sometimes even torture.
What does Destiny, Israel's number one supporter on the internet, have to say about this? Let's listen in.
Point about the whole the Israel-Palestine thing, about how no one really cares about any of the nuance. And you say you're really critical of Israel, which I think you are in like a normal way, but I'm just wondering, given their recent policy, do you know what, or policy, it's a law, do you know what their law is? The recent...
I've seen the headlines about it. Do I need to go read up on it?
Yeah, I think Moon knows about it.
The headlines I saw with it basically is that...
Why is my internet... Good time for a Mossad DDoS attack. Real quick, look at these comments. I thought they were interesting. I feel like he has no problems calling Republicans evil. Am I remembering that wrong? It's so funny how Destiny can call Hassan evil and Trump evil, but when it comes to Israel, he acts like he doesn't know what the word means. Destiny just doesn't want to hear it. Defending this is a bad look. Tiny. Destiny is a Mossad name. Destiny comment section calling out hypocrisy. Again, it's very easy to just think about this as we're just analyzing internet drama. Online influencers are, and there's so many people that do this that are adjacent to me. That's all. Their whole channel depends on what did Destiny say today or what did Tim Pool say today. It's just like, again, meme adoption curve. I believe that this is representative of where the winds are moving. If even Destiny's fans are having to say Israel is evil, that tells you about where we're going to go, and then therefore provides you information about how you should adapt accordingly from the point of view of memetics. But let's continue.
that like if you engage in terrorist acts against like the Jewish character of Israel, that can be like a death penalty offense, basically?
So essentially, it's designed to assign the death penalty for Palestinians, but not for Israelis who kill Palestinians.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, like, do you think, because I think you're really harsh on a lot of the anti-Israel people, you just see them as like psychos or completely unreasonable or, you know, complete retards. But when you look at all of this, and then you also look at what Israeli government officials say, like Ben-Gvir, the finance minister, who say,
Bro, why is there a delay? This literally never happens. Hold on. My other YouTube videos do not take this long to render. So this renders immediately. Shout out to Auspex Tactics. If you guys see what you see the little gray there, that means that's rendered there. But this is not rendering.
things. And then you also look at the United Nations report. Okay, the United Nations is anti-Semitic, fine. You can look at Doctors Without Border, World Central Kitchen. These are good organizations that have been known to do like genuinely.
It must be because Mossad has specifically placed something on this video. No, I'm just saying it's annoying.
Really good work, right? I'm sure you're familiar with Doctors Without Border.
I've heard of them.
So kind of at what point do you say like, okay, it's probably reasonable for someone to look at the state of Israel and say, yeah, this state is operating in like an extremely evil way. I'm trying to be careful with my words here, but I think you understand what I'm getting at.
Operating extremely
It's kind of the line that we need. What's up?
Operating extreme what? What'd you say?
Like they're just operating in an evil manner, just holistically evil. Because it's one thing to disagree.
Holistically evil. What is that? What do you mean by like everything? Like their healthcare system is evil, and like what do you mean by holistically evil?
No, like
Pungent Zeus, once again, I appreciate the big super chat. Happy Easter, my ninja. Happy Easter, my brother from another mother. Happy Easter to all of you watching, by the way. Okay. Christ is risen. Let's continue to watch, though. Again, that's really annoying, the clicks. It's, like, not rendering.
the things they're doing are like too evil or too far-fetched for it to just be like nuanced. Like the current government is just evil. Netanyahu and this current government is evil. Like at what point do you kind of draw the line? Like is it this new law?
Well, we would draw the line between that being evil or by supporting them. Or what line drawing? What do you mean by that?
I guess specifically just looking at the Israeli government as a whole and saying that it's an evil government, yeah, and being like a lot more critical of them.
I don't know what that does. I have no interest in like the labeling. I don't know what that means. You can be super critical of the Israeli government. You should be, but like we have to label them evil. Like when I hear people say shit like this, it sounds like people have no concept of what we should do about it. I'm just trying to virtue signal on things. Like what's it mean? Like label them as evil? I don't even know if I've labeled Hamas as evil. Like,
forget the label. Well, you can forget the label.
I believe he said that Charlie Kirk was demonic, and Trump is demonic and satanic. Somebody confirm that? Just pointing that out.
But you're extremely critical of people who like just lose their minds when it comes to Israel, which I understand, right? A lot of them are complete retards. They don't know what they're talking about.
Okay.
But at the same time, it seems like you're just way more critical of other countries that commit these sort of war crimes like Russia. Like if Russia were to impose a law that says anyone with Ukrainian ethnicity.
I am more critical of Russia than Israel. Yes, that is true. For sure. I even regardless of how fucked Israel's behavior is on a lot of shit today, I would still probably be more critical of Russia. Yes.
Well, you said still probably. So I'm wondering like what would they have to do for you to see that?
I don't even know. It's one is an ally that is largely aligned with our interests in the region, and the other is diametrically opposed to our country. So what would an do for me to support them less than an enemy who's diametrically opposed to us? I would have really think about weighing the pros and cons of that. I'm not 100% sure what the balancing test would look like. But also,
so it's kind of a strategic thing for you?
No. It's not a strategic thing. Yeah. It's a completely and utterly irrelevant thing. Why do I have to have a ranking in my head of like the badness of different countries or whatever? Like who's like the worst, like Israel or Russia? We're trying like why? I just would.
Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are both equally evil, right? Why do we have to have a ranking? How would Destiny respond to that argument? Who knows?
I don't even think about these things in these concepts. It's just such a weird way to approach that.
I mean, I think you misinterpreted what I said about the whole label thing, or maybe I communicated it poorly. I probably did, but like, it's just saying like, what does Israel have to do for you to be a lot more critical of them and openly critical of them? You're really like, it seems like you don't show a lot of sympathy for people who are extremely upset with Israel or extremely upset
because most of the people that are extremely upset with them are fucking retarded. I'm not. The reason why the reason why I don't have the word appearance of being extremely critical of them is because the only people on this sphere in the West are all pro-pally retards. But like, I've been on an okay number of shows now. I think 5+ in the past year at least of me like debating like the rabid, crazy pro-Zionist people. They're just not that common in the West. I just don't get the chance to even debate these people. So instead, it's just a bunch of uneducated, retarded, pro-pally people who have the worst takes in the history of all of them.
Yeah, like.
By the way, if you guys want to see Destiny get absolutely destroyed, you gotta watch. Destiny gets into a debate with Yishai Fleischer. Yishai Fleischer, the Jewish Nick Fuentes. All of you should subscribe. I believe I'm subscribed. Yep. You need to be watching the Jewish Nick Fuentes. Okay?
For Jews than what would have otherwise existed in other parts of the world.
Well, yeah, but it's not okay. That's true.
Not just
that's
that.
True.
I understand
that's
it's not just
true.
that. There's history
that's
here.
True.
There's
You are right
yeah.
that we are trying to carve out a more decent life here, and I guess my point is that we'd like to carve out a little bit more peace through no more bad guys in our country.
Anyway, Yishai destroys Destiny over and over again because Yishai is the Nick Fuentes of the Jews. Anyway, back to this.
I imagine when you're arguing with a pro-Palestine person and they say something like it's a genocide, that's really easy to argue against. You can make a lot of arguments for why it's not.
Well, it's not even just that. It's just having no like.
That's part of the problem. Is that I think the pro-Palestine people don't know what arguments or points to make. Like everything's a genocide. It's all occupied land, and then it becomes really easy for someone like you to just argue against that because they just come off as completely retarded. But if they were to push you on, for example, why do you think literally every single human rights organization in the world is saying that Israel is basically committing war crimes en masse? They did the one where they opened fire on the Gazans looking to receive aid. They did
the problem is that for and I've said this before.
It's like incident after incident after incident.
Yeah, it is. But like, how many of these end up being complete and utter bullshit, right? Like, how many of these end up just being incorrect or misstated? Or, the Flower massacre, the Al Ali Hospital thing, the lies about like how many months were we told? Like 2 years ago, the IPC 5 classification rating encompassed there are more starving people in the Gaza Strip today than there are starving people in the entire planet. I don't know what it is that brain breaks the international community about Israel. It might be that there's so many different Arab states that are part of the United Nations, and this like skews the special rapporteur or the appointments of people to do these things. But like, wait. Okay. But all that to say that like I don't understand what the point is of any of this. Like, I can be critical of Israel while still thinking the international community for some reason is just a retarded perspective on things related to Israel. Like,
what would it take for you to stop supporting them? For you to say that what they're
I don't know if I would support Israel today. If a Democratic president came in today, I don't know if we should have like as formal a relationship with Israel. The problem though is that the way that I would have to approach this would be so contrary to anything that anybody in the West even understands because people are so fucking retarded. If we abandon Israel completely, that is probably the worst thing that could happen for the Palestinians. Because if Israel has no restrictions on what they can do from the West, they would probably go way fucking harder. And that would be a thing that I would have to consider in terms of like, well, if we stop
potentially, or if we stopped offering unconditional military aid to Israel, if all of our politicians stopped saying we have an ironclad religious commitment to Israel because God granted them that land, maybe without our military support, they'd be less inclined to do these things because then they'd be at risk of a united attack by Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, all these other states. So if Israel started actually just straight up massacring people in the West Bank, well then the Arab countries would do something about it, and without America's backing, Israel would be like, "Oh shit, we shouldn't do this." And what's the point of giving aid to Israel unless we're able to leverage it to say, "Hey, how about you drag every one of these settlers out of the West Bank and put them in court and try them and put them right alongside the Hamas members to show equal justice?" Because the Israelis don't believe, some Israelis, the Jewish supremacists don't believe in equal justice because they have a screwed up ethno-supremacist ideology. Anyway.
Conditioning aid, we stop supporting them militarily, we're basically just sacrificing them as an ally completely. Who's to say how Israel will behave in the future? That would not only be bad for Palestinians, but potentially bad for U.S. interests as well. I don't know what that future would look like.
Yeah, I actually agree with you on this. I think you're one of the few people who can like just look at what would practically happen. Because I don't think the whole genocide that shit is not something that I agree with, but I don't think that's gotten to Palestinian people anywhere either. But like, it's just very difficult to be critical of people who are anti-Israel when you have all of these reports from like Doctors Without Border, World Central Kitchen. I mean, this is the first time you're saying this, that I've heard you say this, that you wouldn't want a Democratic president to have formal relations with Israel if they were being nominated for president. I didn't think that was something you would say.
I literally complain. How many times have I said? I feel like I've said like a million times. Like all these motherfuckers are pro-Trump. All these motherfuckers are fucking MAGA as fuck. All these motherfuckers are doing shit to fuck the United States over. All these motherfuckers are holding our whole conversation hostage in the West. I feel like I made this complaint like 50 million fucking times.
Well, yeah, but like not holding formal relations is a pretty big thing.
I don't know if I would. I didn't even say. Wait, hold on. I didn't even say I would commit to that. I don't know if I would say we cut off all from relations with Israel. That's an.
Okay, my point is, I don't. Dude, it gets tiring. Listen. It can get tiring to listen to someone who uses the R word and swears all the time. And this is coming from someone who says fuck a lot, but like, holy, like fucking, it's just like, dude, you say fucking retard enough. Anyway, my point is, this is relevant. If you are a professional vibe checker, as I am, this should give you some information as to where the vibes are moving. Whoops. As to how well Israel is doing. Whoops. Jesus. Yeah, Destiny's own fans calling Israel a terrorist state. So, listen, I've spoken to Destiny about this several times. I tried to make my point. And hopefully, when enough people point out the same aspect of reality, even people who can't see that aspect of reality eventually are forced to have to navigate around it to the point where they have to acknowledge it. And hopefully that's Destiny. Anyway, do people have opinions? By the way, shout out to LeVar Ball, my absolute boy. Big Baller Brand. Or what is it? What is LeVar's thing? It's Big Baller Brand. Yeah, Big Baller Brand. My absolute boy, LeVar. Thank you for being a member. By the way, for those interested, you can become a YouTube member. It offers you zero benefits. You get nothing out of it. But for $1.99 a month, it just adds on to whatever you pay for YouTube Premium or whatever it is. You can show this channel support, and I do appreciate that if you do. But there's absolutely no obligation or benefit for joining. So thank you, LeVar King. All right, do people have questions? We've been streaming for an hour. I've done 2 phenomenal segments. Also, I have to get to the video of Saddam Hussein's coup, which is crazy. But I'll momentarily interact with my chat. The Nick Fuentes of the Jews is tough to parse. Just watch Yishai Fleischer and you'll know exactly what I mean. Okay? You'll know what I mean. Hold on, wait, there was actually a good question. Where is it? What do you think is the percentage of Jewish supremacists in Israel? That's a good question. I don't know. I wouldn't claim to know. Everyone who you could one simple heuristic for this is how many people voted for the Jewish Power Party, of which Ben Gvir is the head of. Of that, there are definitely people who would vote for that. They're like, look, I don't like the guy, but I'm so worried about my security that I'm going to vote for the extremist. Which is, not entirely illogical, or at least it's not impossible to understand that motivation. But it's significant. Unfortunately, it's significant. And Jewish Israelis, like hardcore Jewish Israelis, of which many of the Jewish supremacists are, because Jewish supremacy gets its moral power from Judaism. Like the idea that the Jews are God's chosen people and that they're entitled to a particular piece of land between the Nile and the Euphrates. Right? There's the way that you arrive at that ideology is directly from a more literalist, non-universalist interpretation of Judaism. So, Jewish supremacists and hardcore religious Zionists, they not only believe this, they're a growing proportion of Israel's demographics, which Benny Morris has pointed out to Coleman Hughes, of all people. LeVar, I'd like to know the best Primarch from Warhammer in your opinion. Well, as an Iron Hands player, I would say Ferrus Manus, but he's a little, I wouldn't want to lose my head over that comment. Best Primarch? Well, there's only 2 on the tabletop. And as much as I like the lore, I am a tabletop simulator player first and foremost. Would I prefer Rebuta Gilliman or Lionel Johnson? Really haven't played with either. I feel like, Rebuta Gilliman is just solid with the double oath. You can't beat that. Ultramarines has +1 to wound. Absurd. Should have been gone from the beginning that they added that. That's ridiculous. They have their own units now. They may as well be a Divergent chapter. But Lionel Johnson's pretty strong as a fighting character with Deep Strike and all that. So I'm going to go with Rebuta Gilliman because I think the double oath is more powerful. And I play Hammer of Avernai, so I get that kind of in a reduced version through Canik Var. But anyway, it's beside the point. Doobie with the big super chat and the frightening profile picture. The only criticism the pro-Israel side accepts is, yes, they've done a lot of evil. Yes, they continue to do evil. But if we don't pay for it and give them unconditional support, they'll do even more. Yeah, I agree. I argued with Lonerbox about this about 9 months ago or more. And it's like, we have to keep supporting them because if we stop supporting them, it'll be the worst. It's like, we can literally shut down their military equipment. We can turn off the code to their jets. It's one of the reasons the United States sells arms to like Saudi Arabia and a lot of the countries. Because, and it is a cynical argument, and I do buy it, and it's got some legs. If we sell military equipment to Saudi Arabia, then they're permanently reliant on us for all of their parts, all of their maintenance. They become permanently within our sphere of influence. Whereas if they buy military equipment from China and Russia for the same reasons, they have the parts and the maintenance equipment, they become, client states of Russia and China. So that's a valid point. But here we go. We have the leverage. We sell military equipment to Israel. Let's do it. Get the settlers out. Most Israelis don't even support the settlers. So we're actually giving the good Israelis a tool to say, hey, everyone, you have a choice between U.S. military aid or the settlers. Let's as a country decide, because the U.S. is giving us an ultimatum. I feel like that would empower the Israelis to clean up their own crazies. But then again, the Knesset just passed the crazy death penalty law, so we might be past the point of no return. There'll be another massive super chat. I appreciate it. Ironically, it reminds me of the appeasement strategy that was tried with Hitler early on. Fair enough. Fair enough. As everyone knows, Hitler just wanted to, reunify Poland. That was it. He had no ambitions further than that. For the non-aware, there are many on the far right side who actually think Hitler was a wholesome Chungus, to quote Nick Fuentes, who didn't want to kill Slavs to make room for Germans, let alone didn't want to kill Jewish people. And so it's hilarious to see that autistic wing of the far right flap about. Anyway, hold on. Let's try and get to some of these comments here. Destiny and ContraPoints both suffer from leftist derangement syndrome. They view the left as so militant they need to push back. Well, look, this is deeply understandable. As a general rule of thumb, if someone who you know is deeply incompetent is advocating for something, just being against that thing will probably put you in the right camp like 60% of the time. So it's not a bad heuristic. I know people like this, who are like, look, I don't know much about the whole Israel situation, but I know that these far leftist, insane people support it, so that's why I'm pro-Israel. Perfectly reasonable. Perfectly reasonable. And you could say the same thing on the right. What would be an equivalent example? I don't know. Maybe I should watch more people who hate right-wingers. But point is, yeah, that's not an unreasonable heuristic. Do you think that if the U.S. pulls funding from Israel, then other foreign nations may fund them instead, like Russia or China? Do we want our enemies to expand their influence in the region? That's a phenomenal question, and it certainly is problematized by my point about what I said earlier. That's why we give military weapons to Saudi Arabia. I would say no, because first off, Israel's in the middle of a war. Well, okay, it depends on it's a hypothetical, but they have all of their supply chains are totally reliant on us currently. Now, they could reorient their supply chains, and the argument that Tucker Carlson has put forward, that I suspect could be true, is that Israel is actually trying to align with India more. India is one of the largest growing economies with a lot of military weapons and nukes, I believe. Isn't India nuclear armed? Yeah, because India and Pakistan are going to nuke each other around the world, most likely. If the world ends from nuclear war, it'll be that just on a random Tuesday, and we'll just all be like, what? And then die. They're going to India. That's why Laura Loomer was in India, for those of you who are terminally online enough to be aware of the important mimetic bellwethers that allow you to predict cultural changes in the future. Israel's trying to warm up to India. So that's a real possibility, but it's like, look, again, the point is to use the leverage now. And there are more people in Israel who want to align with the United States who hate the settlers than there are people who love the settlers, right? So it's like, empower the good Israelis, to do what they need to do. Also, I don't know if China would ally with Israel because they're a Han ethno-state, and they're probably pretty skeptical of another ethno-state, such as Israel. Russia could very well end up, supporting Israel, but who knows? All right, everyone. Jeez, dude, I've been streaming for an hour and 15 minutes. Whew, this is tough, man. This is tough. How do people do it? How do people do it? All right, everyone. If anyone has any final questions, concerns, ideas, Doobie with the $20. Have you read the Yes All Jews article? I'm debating Wick about that on Tuesday. He thinks the author wants a second, third, and fourth Holocaust. Curious how you'd interpret it. I saw that article. I did not read it. Perhaps, Doobie, because of the absolute generous super chat. If it's not too long, maybe we round it out with this. Okay, it's mildly long. I may do that. I might do this one in a different stream. Just FYI, for those who want to. L'chaim Intifada, Amanda Gellender, Jewish anti-Zionist writers. All Jews must kill Zionism within Judaism. 2,000 likes, which on Substack is like ridiculous. If you get like 50 likes on an article, that's well, I guess everything's relative, but this is a lot. This is like a viral article. I've come to have tremendous disdain for my people, the evil we have wrought, and the demons we have become. Our craven hypocrisy, our Holocaust hand-wringing, our self-dissociation, our bottomless both-sidesing. What's wrong with a little both-sidesing? Our catatonic inaction, our feeble sign-waving. Geez, okay. Talk about a run-on sentence. Israel's killed likely has killed hundreds of thousands of people. The depths of our sadism seemingly knows no bounds. It's a fairly long article, and I do actually have something I need to do at the end here. My immediate skepticism is that this is from a leftist, and leftism is kind of nutso. Like the whole yes, all Jews, I'm assuming this is reminiscent of like yes, all men. Like the people who justify saying all cops are bastards. Yes, it's all cops. It's like, okay, I don't really... So, but I'll have more formal thoughts on it in the future, perhaps. But thank you for recommending it, Doobie. Define ethno-state. Israel's only 70% Jewish. An ethno-state is one in which people who have a particular bloodline get citizenship rights. And people who've lived there for 1,000 years are in an apartheid state. That's what I would call an ethno-state. Which is inextricably, undeniably, the description of Israel. All right, hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, it would not be a PF Young stream if we did not get to the stream reaction content section of the Discord. We actually have an interesting quiz we're going to take here. It's a philosophical quiz. Entire screen. Do I do window or entire screen? No, let's do system audio. Perfecto. Gurney. Holy smokers. Wait a minute. What's going on? A random cave in Jerusalem on the third day. Excellent. You just demonetized the stream, but that's fine. Nobody cares. Nobody. Okay, I mean it. It's not a big deal. I appreciate this. Listen, genuinely good pro-social Christian memes can't be beat. Okay? All right, this is what I wanted to get to, though. J.R. Thompson, who, by the way, has literally commented things that have changed how I talk about things publicly. I think JR once commented on a video a while back about how liberalism and colorblindness is basically, you just apply game theory logic to it. Colorblindness works if everyone abides by the same rules, but if only some people say we're going to play the colorblindness game, they will get outvoted as a racial bloc by, for example, people who are Somalian who all come to one place in this whole country and move to one city and vote as a racial bloc. So, Harriet, late to stream. Thoughts on Samson option and its potential role in U.S.-EU decisions? Samson option, i.e. Israel having nuclear weapons and will blow up the whole world rather than lose the state of Israel. Probably. That probably factors into it. But I don't know. It's kind of frightening either way. Doobie, once again, appreciate it. Yeah, it's basically a more inflammatory version of white fragility. It's calling on all Jews to take an active stance against Zionism. Well, look, again, nature has a way of healing itself. Right? So within the Jewish tradition is a very rich tradition of argumentation and kind of dialectic. And so it is some of the best criticism and critiques of Jewish culture and Jewish identity come from within Judaism, which speaks to its mimetic kind of value. We just have to help facilitate that sort of cultural evolution so that the reasonable criticism of Judaism manifests. And I would say, unfortunately, it's not coming from the leftists. Although, like, Norman Finkelstein is someone he criticizes, like, wokeness pretty well. And he comes from a more left-wing perspective, so nobody loves Norman Finkelstein more than I do. All right. JR, let's do this. We're taking a fascism test. In 1950, Theodore Adorno published something about fascism, and we're going to take a test to figure out how fascist I am. Let's begin. Obedience and respect for authority are the most important virtues children should learn. The most important? No. They're important, but not the most important, so I slightly disagree. A person who has bad manners, habits, and breeding can hardly expect to get along with decent people? Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know what breeding means. Does it mean like casual sex or something? If people would talk less and work more, everyone would be better off. Agreed. The businessman and the manufacturer are much more important in society than the artist and professor. Strongly disagree. Holy smokes. Science has its place, but there are many important things that can never be possibly understood by the human mind. Strongly agree. Predictions on how fascist we're going to be? Every person should have complete faith in some supernatural power whose decisions he obeys without questions. It's Easter Sunday. I feel like I'm going to hell if I don't put strongly agree. I'm going to put agree because there are some qualifications. Because you have to have a sophisticated understanding of the nature of that supernatural power. And complete faith. It depends on how we define these things. Young people sometimes get rebellious ideas, but as they grow up, they ought to get over them and settle down. Yeah. Maybe I should have said slightly disagree, because we do need novel ideas. But there are intelligent thinkers who are mature and adult who aren't young, who are putting forward good ideas. So it doesn't have to be the young people. What this country needs most, more than laws and political programs, is a few courageous, tireless, devoted leaders in whom the people can put their faith. A few courageous, tireless, devoted leaders. Let's go with slightly agree, because those leaders need to be correct on things. No sane, normal, decent person could ever think of hurting a close friend or relative. Disagree. Jungian shadow, baby. What are you talking about? Basic human nature to have terrible, dark, intrusive thoughts about hurting those close to you. It is how you act and reflect upon them and how you integrate them that makes a man, or a woman, an adult, an adult. Books and movies ought not to deal with so much with the unpleasant and seamy side of life. They should concentrate on themes that are entertaining or uplifting. Disagree. Disagree. We must have... Art must reflect reality, and reality is dark as well as light. An insult to our honor should always be punished? No. Learn to develop a thick skin. I'm going to say disagree instead of strongly disagree because it should be contended with, depending on how you define punished. Sex crimes such as rape and attacks on children deserve more than mere imprisonment. Such criminals ought to be publicly whipped or worse. You know, it's very interesting. This whole notion of should we have public executions, should we have public prisons? Some people say it's very barbaric. That's where my intuition immediately goes. But then you have someone like Michel Foucault who points out that when you hide all of the public punishment and public dispensation of justice, you enable incredible abuses within the prison system. You enable all kinds of terrible things. And so, you know, is there an argument for like public executions? It seems a little gratuitous. I feel like the pros don't outweigh the cons. But my point is it's a more nuanced discussion than people make it out to be. I will say disagree with this for now. There's hardly anything lower than a person who does not feel a great love, gratitude, and respect for his parents. Hardly anything lower? How about a child molester? Let's go with only slightly agree. No, because some parents can be terrible. So we'll go with disagree. Most of our social problems would be solved if we could somehow get rid of the immoral, crooked, and feeble-minded people. No, I think if we adopted an attitude where getting rid of feeble-minded people was a goal of the state, we would cultivate a psychological state that would inevitably lead to self-destruction. This is why I'm against like the euthanasia of the disabled. The moment you put forward a program like that, it just spirals into horror, which is, you know, it's a cultivation of vice argument is what it's called. So we're going to go with strongly disagree. Homosexuals are hardly better than criminals. Amen. No, it's terrible. When a person has a problem or worry, it's best for him to not think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I disagree. You should contend with it. You should look inward and understand why it's bothering you. Don't be a Mark Andreessen with no self-reflection. Nowadays, more and more people are prying into matters that should remain personal and private. Maybe? I mean, social media has an erasure of privacy. That's kind of odd. I'm going to go with slightly agree. I think. Because it's actually good that people are more open about personal things because it builds a network of trust. Slightly agree. Holy smokes. All right, Doobie, I really appreciate the big super chats. I will come back to these at the end, so hold that thought. We're almost wrapped up here. Some people are born with an urge to jump from high places. What does that even mean? Some people are fucked in the head? Yes. People can be divided into two distinct classes, the weak and the strong. I wonder if this is more or less fascist. I'm going to go with disagree. Because what people view as weakness. This sounds like some neo-pagan wrote this about Christianity. And it is the strong who are what many would consider the weak. Someday it will probably be shown that astrology can explain a lot of things. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Hot take on astrology. Very easy to shit on, make fun of people who abide by the zodiac signs and all that. Carl Jung was big into astrology. Why? I'll just explain to you the information that I learned in the sequence that I learned it, which makes me think of things. At first I was like, astrology is complete fucking bullshit. It's all nonsense, right? However, then I learned the reason that you put in your date and like the location of your birth and all that is because it tells you the actual real alignment of all the stars on the moment of your birth. Which is a very sophisticated thing to do. To be able to do that sort of astrological mapping is pretty wild. So astrology is like, okay, damn, right off the bat, you're like, oh, we're dealing with something more sophisticated here. Its effect on personality, like are Virgos really more passionate and all that? It's not the alignment of the stars in the sky, okay? It's not like gravity changing your hormones. What is the hypothesis, I'm not saying I buy this, but at least it's more credit to what people will immediately dismiss, is that your astrological sign tells you the season with which you were born. And depending on the season with which you were born, the 9 months that your mother was pregnant with you, she was inhaling different pollen, different environmental substances at different points during the gestation period that theoretically could have a mild statistically significant impact on personality differences. Because we know that there's a lot that has to do with like fetal hormonal soup that a fetus develops in. So if you were born in the cold heart of winter at an important gestation period, your mother might have been inhaling a different type of pollen than if you were born in the middle of summer, and maybe that has a slight average effect on personality. Whether or not that's true, it's not a totally unreasonable hypothesis. I believe there's animals that vary relatively distinctly in like their fur color or whatever based on the time of year they're born. So it's not totally unreasonable to think that that might be true with what do you call it? Astrology. Anyway, we're going to go with slightly agree because it's probably true. And I love schizo theories like that. It's not actually probably true, but whatever. Wars and social troubles may someday be ended by an earthquake or flood that will destroy the whole world. Yeah, I guess that's just true. We don't have troubles if there's no one here to have the troubles, so sure. Most people don't realize how much our lives are controlled by plots hatched in secret places. I'm going to go with strongly agree. No, we'll go with regularly agree because it's not in secret. It's called the World Economic Forum and the Jewish Zionist Congress. Okay, human nature being what it is, there will always be war and conflict. Agree. But we can sublimate these impulses for war and conflict into something more pro-social, like exploration. That's why I'm pro-space travel. Familiarity breeds contempt. Could not tell you what that even means. Extensive knowledge or close association with someone leads to a loss of respect for them. Sometimes. But often familiarity breeds respect and understanding. So I'm going to go with slightly disagree. Nowadays, when so many different kinds of people move around and mix together, a person has to protect himself, especially against catching an infection or disease from them. I mean, maybe. Isn't this what COVID taught us? Isn't this a very straightforward infectious disease point of view? Let's go with slightly agree. The wild sex life of the old Greeks and Romans was tame compared to some of the going-ons in this country, even in places where people less expect it. To be honest, I don't know that much about the wild sex life of the old Greek and Romans, and I don't know much about the going-ons in this country. I feel like child abuse was rampant then and in now, so we'll go with slightly disagree. The true American way of life is disappearing so fast that force may be necessary to preserve it. Do you mean like forceful enforcement of the borders? Depends on what you mean by force. I feel like I'm leaning fascist, so to balance it out, I'm going to say slightly disagree because I don't think force, well, that force may be necessary, as in like deportations. Actually, we're going to go slightly agree. I'd prefer not. I prefer a compromise. Give the dreamers the ability to assimilate. If you've been here, you're an American, assimilate. But we certainly need to enforce border security. Most people just don't know what's good for them. Ooh. Most people don't know? I think I agree with this, especially nowadays. I would say the problem with modern society is deracination. We've been alienated from our traditions that told us what was good for us. And instead we live in the world of, oh, just choose what you want to do. Follow your dreams, follow your heart. That doesn't lead to happiness for most people. So I'm going to say agree. What the youth needs most is strict discipline, rugged determination, and the will to work and fight for family and country. Look, I like civil service. I like civil service. I like mandatory civil service, mandatory military service. So I'm going to go only slightly agree because I don't know if it's what they need most. but they need some of it. No weakness or difficulty can hold us back if we have enough willpower. Willpower. No, this sounds Nietzschean. No weakness or hold us back if we have the power of Christ. Then I would strongly agree, but we're going to disagree. Ladies and gentlemen, what is our score? From minus 90 to plus 90. Mildly fascist, it looks like. Can you measure authoritarianism without smuggling liberal assumptions about what counts as healthy thinking? Highest, superstition, authoritarian submission, destructiveness, and cynicism. Your 9 dimensions. All right, I believe the lower the percentage, the closer to the left. Normal on conventionalism. I'm in favor of authoritarian submission. I'm low on authoritarian aggression. Anti-introception. When individuals think that subjective attitudes are bad. So I'm low on thinking that subjective attitudes are bad. Superstition, high. Fuck you. I bet the astrology question is the only thing that factors into this one. Power and toughness, only 37%. I feel like I'm pretty powerful and tough. I'm pretty powerful and tough. Destructiveness and cynicism, damn. Projectivity, 16%. Sex, 50%. Dude, the ultimate dark centrist score. I'm 50% sex. Paul, what do you think about sex? 50%. Truly bisexual. Hilarious. Excellent submission, JR. Whoops. Excellent submission, JR. Once again, appreciate the submissions from the Discord. All right, let's get to these super chats. Doobie is just pimping me out. Doobie, I appreciate these very generous super chats. First off, hold on, real quick. Palestinians in Israel proper have full rights and citizenship, not apartheid, but West Bank is. Israel is doing atrocities, but not ethno-state in my opinion. It is an ethno-state because the whole explicit thing that they say is we have to maintain a Jewish majority, which is why we can't give full rights to the citizens in Palestine or in the West Bank. And West Bank is apartheid. That's, yeah, of course. No one disputes that. Well, actually, no serious person disputes that. No person that you should spend time listening to disputes that. That's the best way to say that. But it's not an ethno-state. Well, I would just say it is. It is, hold on, it is absolutely an ethno-state because I could be, if I'm Jewish and I'm born in Brooklyn, New York, Israel will literally grant me citizenship rights on the basis of my genetic identity. That's it. That is the definition of an ethno-state. You see how it takes me a second for that to be the first thing I say? Like, why is that not the first thing that comes in my head? It's because I'm incompetent, okay? Anyway, appreciate the super chat. All right, Doobie. Israel's Supreme Court has rejected the existence of an Israeli nationality on the grounds it would undermine Israel's Jewishness. Israel is a nation organized around and for Jews. That's an ethno-state. I agree. I agree, Doobie. For another $20. Non-Jewish citizens do not have access to the same immigration process programs Jewish citizens do for their family members. And the law says they don't have the right to self-determination, which is unique to Jews. Do not have access to the same immigration process Jewish citizens for their family members. Yes, that's what I'm talking about, the right of return. And they don't have the right of self-determination. I don't know. I will say, I don't know. I've heard Mark Lamont Hill argue this with Destiny, and Destiny seemed to think he made a good point. And if anyone has incentive to say otherwise, it'd be Destiny. I don't know, actually, if you have an Israeli citizen if two Israeli citizens, one Jewish and one Arab, do they have the same rights in every regard as individuals? The point about family law immigration is going to be different because the Jewish Israelis have the right of return stuff. But as citizens, do they have the same rights? I believe the answer is yes. I believe that is a correct talking point from the pro-Israel side, but I don't actually know. $20 to call out one of the commenters. Just swap out Jewish with white in any of the things I mentioned, which is only a small proportion, and I think you call it an ethno-state. Such as non-white citizens do not have access to the same immigration process white citizens do for their family members. Yep, I think that's fair. Don't mean to distract from the content. The guy just doesn't understand the English. That's right, Doobie. That's right, Doobie. You can throw cash at me all you want to distract from the fascism tests that will surely out me. Too big Joel. All right. Donkey Kong coins for 20. Nothing wrong with an ethno-state. Here, take my money. Nothing wrong with an ethno-state. You know what? Theoretically, I could maybe agree. It depends on how it plays out. I do think you can have a state. Yeah, it depends on what the ethnicity is. And I don't even necessarily disagree. I believe in Ireland for the Irish. I think that's fair. I think that Irish culture and Irish people and people of Irish genetics, people whose ancestors go back to Ireland, should be entitled to the land of Ireland. I think that's fair. I just do. America is a little bit different, but as the absolute brilliant Justin put at the beginning, race isn't everything, but it isn't nothing. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we've been streaming for a hot minute. I think we'll wrap this shit up here, as always. Phenomenal stream. Couple announcements. These streams will be available. Again, no one who's watching this needs to know this because you've been watching the stream. My streams, but in the future, my streams will be available on previous live streams until I get another hate speech strike, which will probably happen soon, I'm sure. Maybe even this stream. In which case, we will once again scrub all of the previous live streams as we do. So that is available in the playlist tab of my YouTube channel. What else? If you are interested, once again, I really do appreciate the super chats from everyone. Thank you, Doobie. That's pretty great. I'm hesitant to plug it just yet. You can join the Patreon. You can join the Discord. All that stuff. It's great stuff. April's going to be a hardcore month for me, all right? I'm making a commitment to the viewers to try and work diligently to get the good ideas out there, okay? And if I can get the Patreon and the YouTube stuff moving, I can actually take a real stab at this as a long-term equilibrium solution until I find a beautiful woman and must support a family, in which case I will go work for Palantir. But until then, I'd like to keep doing this. And thank you to all who support what I'm doing. It's all great stuff. Anyway, we're going to wrap this stuff up. Tropical. Do I go to Scotland, Ireland, France, Turkey, Israel, or some other... Go to Turkey. Right? Nobody loves Turkey more than I do, okay? Nobody loves Turkey more than I do. Go to Turkey. Do I think multi-generational Irish immigrants who have lived there and contributed should not have rights? No, they should live there and have rights. But I think it's fair to have an ethno-state. Anyway, everyone, I appreciate it. Oh, whoops, I almost fucked my own stream here. Happy Easter. It's Sunday. If you haven't called your parents, do that. That's actually just call your parents. You should do that. If you can. If you have the fortune of having parents that are around still. Just give them a call. Say what's up. Happy Easter. Say it feels like the Christian thing to do. So I've just been caught up in the Christian moment. So if one of you calls your parents as a result of this stream, I will have considered my work here done in terms of being pro-social. I called them Saturday. Anyway, everyone, Godspeed. 07's in the chat. The Zoomers taught me this means 07 means salute. Thank you as always. And we'll probably stream Tuesday. Maybe not. Maybe Wednesday. Anyway, Godspeed. Peace.